Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you truly rested? Not scrolled through your phone while half watching TV? Not collapsed in exhaustion after pushing yourself to the breaking point? I mean real rest. The kind where your mind stops racing, where you're not planning the next thing or rehashing the last thing, where you're simply present, at peace, connected to something deeper than your to-do list. If you can't remember, you're not alone. We live in a culture that treats rest like a luxury for people who've earned it. Hustle culture tells us that rest is what you do when you've conquered your goals. Grind until you've made it, then maybe, if you're lucky, you can slow down. But here's what most people miss. That entire framework is built on a lie, and that lie is killing our creativity, destroying our health, and preventing us from building anything that actually lasts. What if I told you that rest isn't the reward for productivity? What if rest is the source of it? What if the greatest breakthroughs, the most transformative ideas, the innovations that actually change the world, they don't come from grinding harder? They come from people who've learned to create from stillness instead of exhaustion. Today, we're going back to the beginning again, because there's a pattern in Genesis that most people completely overlook, and when you understand this pattern, it changes everything about how you approach your work, your creativity, and your life. Let's start with Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now here's the question. Nobody asks, why did God rest? Was he tired? Did creating the universe exhaust him? Isaiah 40:28 tells us, "The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary." So if God doesn't get tired, why did he rest? He rested to establish a pattern. He was showing us something fundamental about how creation is designed to work. Rest isn't a concession to human weakness. Rest is built into the architecture of reality itself. Think about it. God could have kept creating. He could have made the seventh day just another workday, but he stopped. He blessed the stopping. He made it holy. That word holy means set apart, sacred, different from everything else. God was saying this rhythm of work and rest isn't optional. It's essential. And then, when he gives the 10 Commandments, one of them is entirely about rest. Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. This isn't a suggestion. This is a command, and it's the only commandment that starts with remember, as if God knew we'd be the most likely to forget this one. Now, let me show you what happens when you ignore this pattern. You start creating from depletion instead of abundance. You start building from anxiety instead of vision. You start innovating from survival mode instead of creative mode. And everything you produce reflects that source. Let me tell you about someone I know. I'll call him Marcus. Marcus was a high-performing executive at a major corporation. He prided himself on being available 24/7, emails at midnight, calls on weekends. He hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. He told himself, I'll rest when the project is done. I'll slow down when we hit our targets. But here's what was happening under the surface. Marcus was making decisions from exhaustion. His creativity had flatlined. He was reactive instead of visionary. Every problem felt like a crisis because he had no margin to think clearly. His team was burning out because he was modeling burnout as the standard. And the worst part? He genuinely believed this was what it meant to be committed. He thought rest was for people who weren't serious about their work. Then he had a health scare. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to force him to stop. His doctor told him bluntly, "Your body's breaking down because you're running it like a machine that never turns off. You need to rest or this will get much worse." Marcus was terrified, not of the health issue, but of what would happen if he actually stopped. If I'm not pushing, everything will fall apart. That's the lie many of us believe, that the world requires our constant striving to hold together. During his forced rest, something unexpected happened. Marcus started reading again, not business books, not self-help, just stories, fiction, poetry, things that had nothing to do with his work. And in those moments of mental stillness, ideas started emerging, connections he hadn't seen before, solutions to problems that had felt unsolvable for months. He realized something profound. He hadn't been out of ideas. He'd been too exhausted to access them. The creativity was always there, but you can't hear it when you're running at full speed. When Marcus went back to work, he made a radical decision. He started practicing Sabbath. 1 full day a week, no works, no emails, no strategic planning, just rest. His colleagues thought he was crazy. You'll fall behind, you'll lose your edge. The opposite happened. Within 6 months, Marcus was producing better work than he had in years. His decision-making improved. His team's morale improved because he stopped operating from panic. He started leading from clarity instead of urgency. And the business results? They went up, not down. Same person, same role, different source. Now let me connect this to what's happening at the cutting edge of innovation. Bill Gates is famous for his Think Weeks. Twice a year, he goes completely off the grid for a week. No phone, no meetings, just reading and thinking. He said that some of Microsoft's most important strategic decisions came from those weeks of rest. Jeff Bezos has talked extensively about the importance of sleep and rest for decision quality. He said, "I prioritize 8 hours of sleep, even if it means fewer waking hours, because the quality of decisions I make in a rested state is far superior to the quantity of decisions I could make while exhausted." Elon Musk, who's known for intense work schedules, has also talked about learning this the hard way. He said, "I used to think sleep was optional. Now I realize that without adequate rest, the decisions I make are worse, and I end up having to redo work because I wasn't thinking clearly." These are some of the most successful innovators in the world, and they've all learned the same lesson. Rest isn't the enemy of productivity, it's the foundation of it. But here's what neuroscience tells us about why this works. There's a part of your brain called the default mode network. It activates when you're not focused on a specific task, when you're daydreaming, when you're taking a walk, when you're resting. And here's the fascinating part. This is when your brain does its most important creative work. It's consolidating information, making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, processing problems in the background. Dr. Andrew Huberman calls this non-sleep deep rest, and he says it's essential for learning, creativity, and mental health. Your brain needs downtime to integrate what you've learned and to generate new insights. When you're constantly grinding, you're blocking this process. You're filling every moment with input, and there's no space for processing. This is why breakthroughs often come in the shower, on a walk, or right before falling asleep. Your conscious mind stops trying to force a solution, and your default mode network kicks in and solves it for you. Rest isn't wasted time. Rest is when your brain is doing the work that makes everything else possible. Now let's go back to the biblical framework. In Mark 6:31, Jesus says to his disciples, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." This is right after they've been doing intense ministry work. They're exhausted. And Jesus doesn't say, "Push through, there are more people to serve." He says, "Come and rest." Why? Because Jesus understood something we've forgotten. You can't pour from an empty vessel. You can't serve from depletion. You can't create from exhaustion. And here's the deeper truth. When you refuse to rest, you're operating from the belief that everything depends on you, that if you stop, it all falls apart. That's not faith. That's pride disguised as commitment. Sabbath rest is an act of trust. It's saying, God is sovereign. The world doesn't require my constant striving. I can stop and everything will be okay. That's why it's holy. It's a declaration that God is God and you are not. When you practice Sabbath, you're clearing your channel in a different way than we talked about in the last video. You're not just interrupting lies. You're creating space for truth to emerge naturally. You're allowing the creative flow to happen without forcing it. Here's the practical framework, and I know some of you are already thinking, I can't take a full day off. That's not realistic. So let me give you different levels of entry. Level 1, start with a Sabbath hour. 1 hour a week where you do absolutely nothing productive. No phone, no planning, just rest. Sit in silence. Take a walk in nature. Read something that feeds your soul. This isn't about religion, this is about rhythm. Level 2, build to a Sabbath morning or afternoon. Half a day where you disconnect from work completely. No checking email just in case, no thinking about Monday's meetings, true rest. Level 3, practice a full Sabbath day. 24 hours from sundown to sundown following the biblical pattern. This is where the real transformation happens. That's what I want you to notice. On the other side of that rest, your creativity doesn't decrease, it explodes. Problems that felt impossible suddenly have clear solutions. Ideas that were stuck start flowing. Decisions that were clouded become obvious. Because rest doesn't take you away from your work. It prepares you to do your best work. But here's the warning. If you try to practice Sabbath while still believing the hustle culture lie, it won't work. You'll be physically resting but mentally grinding. You'll be on the walk but planning the next project. You'll be in the quiet but replaying the last conversation. True rest requires surrendering control. It requires believing that God's design is better than your grind. It requires trusting that the renewed earth won't be built by exhausted people pushing through. It will be built by rested people creating from overflow. Larry Fink of BlackRock has talked about the crisis of burnout in leadership. He said, "We're seeing a mental health epidemic among high performers because we've normalized unsustainable work patterns. The companies that will thrive in the next decade are the ones that build rest into their culture." Even in the secular business world, leaders are waking up to what the Bible has said for thousands of years. You can't build something lasting on a foundation of depletion. So here's the question I'll leave you with. What would change in your life if you truly believed that rest is sacred? What would you create if you stopped building from exhaustion and started creating from abundance? In the next video, we're going to explore the ultimate vision, the renewed earth. What are we actually building toward? Because once you understand the destination, every decision you make today starts to make sense. Every line of work you do becomes part of a larger story. And rest stops feeling like lost time and starts feeling like preparation for what's coming. Drop one word in the comments. What's the first thing you'll do during your Sabbath rest this week? If this shifted something for you, subscribe. We're learning to build from rest, not exhaustion. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.